All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi everybody. This is Luke Black with Softchoice Corporation. Thanks very much for joining us today for understanding IT's role in public cloud security, a very big topic that is on a lot of our plates as IT professionals. Before we kick off, we do have just a real quick poll that if everyone can just take 10 seconds to answer, and it's around, do you have integrated security systems in your cloud investment today? Yes, no, unsure. And once we get a lot of people answering through that quick poll, we'll get started here. Just a couple of logistics while you are answering that poll. If you do have any questions throughout our time today, please leverage the IM window to type in your questions. To make sure that everybody's experience is as good as it possibly can be, we have muted the line. So please use the IM window at any time. We will have specific breaks throughout the content to answer those questions. Also, we will be recording this session, so we will have a follow-up email after both of our iterations of our webinar have completed by tomorrow. We'll send out the recording along with an accompanying blog post that you can reference in the future as well. So great, let's close that poll if we can, and we'll get ready to move on. My name is Luke Black. I'm part of our Microsoft team here at Softchoice, and I'll be helping just facilitate. By no means am I the presenter. We are very, very lucky enough to have Skip Purdy, who's one of our senior solution architects out of Atlanta, who will be our primary driver today, and we couldn't be more excited and thrilled and lucky to have Skip with us today. So without any further ado, I would like to turn it over to Skip to give just a little bit more of a background on you, Skip, and then you can take us right into the content. Thanks again for joining, everybody. Skip?
Thanks, Luke. Glad to be with you all today. My experience in the market, I've been in the Microsoft ecospace my entire career, spanning the past, oh my goodness, 30 years or so, including about 12 years at Microsoft in various marketing, sales, and engineering roles. And after that, I've been in the consulting world ever since, helping deploy Microsoft solutions. In my time at Softchoice, we've spent the majority of our engagements focus on cloud deployment, and so Azure is a big part of that. And as a result, we've worked with many customers on working with them about their cloud security. So today, what we want to do is focus on cloud security. There's been a lot of interest and opportunity with cloud technologies over the past few years, and some confusion about security in the cloud. And this can cause slower adoption of those technologies or perhaps open up new risks. So that's why we selected this topic today to help clear up some of that confusion. Our goal is at the end of our conversation today, you'll have a better idea of what your cloud provider's responsibilities are and what you need to do to protect and secure your environments. So the cloud can mean different things to different people. So we're going to start today with a level set on what our perspective of the cloud is. And then we'll show a model of the cloud security responsibilities that will formulate the foundation of our discussion today. So this is what we think about the cloud, not this blank space. I'll fill it in just a second. But this is a discussion that we normally have with customers in person on a whiteboard. But because we're doing this on a webinar today, I want to present this more or less in a PowerPoint type of environment. But when we look at what customers are trying to do with the clouds, they're really trying to accomplish several goals. And these really could apply to virtually any business system that's being deployed. They want to improve the customer experience. Okay? In other words, what their touch point with customers is and how people are interacting with that organization. Next is they want to manage the risk. So security is part of that risk profile that needs to be addressed. And third is what's the impact of the business and how can we improve things. And when IT gets involved in these aspects and tries to provide solutions, we see that IT has some goals and some actions that need to take place. And we see these taking place over time, and there's functionality that is developed and implemented in the cloud itself. Now, IT has certain investments that they make, and over time, those investments will increase. But in traditional data center sense, what we see is a slow increase in data center assets and the types of applications that IT can support. Now, the downfall of that is that the business expects more. The business may start out at a lower point, but at some point their expectations of IT and what IT is providing them far exceeds what IT is able to deliver. And we see this consistently with most organizations. So one of the ways to address that gap is by implementing solutions in the cloud. Okay, but in doing so, we start to see that there are issues that crop up when we transition from a traditional IT model to a cloud-based model. So one of these things might be no plan. Okay, so we see a fair number of organizations go straight into a planning operation without actually thinking about what it needs to accomplish, and they will run pilots after pilots after pilots trying to get that model right, or it will take forever to deploy a solution. One of the key advantages of doing cloud-based solutions is the fact that you can deploy solutions very quickly. So if it's taking 3 to 5 years to accomplish something, then that really is negating one of the true benefits of going to the cloud in the first place. Next problem is do it yourself. Okay, there's a number of reasons that we see do it yourself occur. One is it may be a business unit that is trying to deploy a solution with or without the assistance of IT, or maybe I've got a unit of IT that really doesn't have the expertise to deploy a cloud solution, and they'll try and do it without the true expertise. And when that happens, it turns into a skills gap. They don't understand how to optimize the solution, or isn't deployed correctly, and this leads to a significant failure rate of those applications. And the third area is governance, and governance crops up in the cloud quite frequently in two areas, one in financial governance and the second in administrative control. And in both cases, it manifests itself as having no control over the environment. Okay, and this can cause issues later on. But fundamentally, the idea of what you do in the cloud and in creating a hybrid IT experience is to close in this gap of what the business expects versus what IT is able to provide. Okay, so that gap is really the thing that IT should focus on the most and really deliver the best impact to the business. So one of the things we look for is what are the areas where cloud security comes into place, and which of our business problems actually are developed by this. And realistically, all of our problem areas need to be addressed. Okay, so being able to address a plan for properly securing our environment, having the proper skills, and having proper governance of our solutions in the cloud are all aspects that need to be taken care of. Okay, but let's also take a close look at some other aspects of what's going on. Okay, so a few data points for you. 2 billion data records lost by organizations out into the wild in the past 12 months. Okay, so that's a high number of records where hackers have gotten in and actually stolen data right under the noses of IT organizations. Okay. Second is 25% of people are reusing credentials. They'll take a password and they'll use it on every single system that requires a password. The Yahoo breach is a good example of that, and it seems to have exposed about 25% of all users of the internet. Another statistic, almost half of all enterprise organizations suffered at least 2 breaches last year, And the time for the detection of those breaches is almost 100 days. I mean, that's a long time for a hacker to be in your network without you having any knowledge of that. And the last one of these points is that 62% of enterprises report they don't have the proper staff and the expertise to solve their security needs. And they also can't find the right employees to support their requirements. So these are all issues that we see across the board with our customers. Okay. Now, that being said, don't panic. Okay. Don't jump off the cliff. It's not the end of the world. Okay. There are significant things we can do to support your needs. And part of it is simply understanding what the different models of security look like and how we can implement the correct tools and services to really properly secure your environment. All right, so let's look at this from a perspective of who does what. When you deploy systems in the cloud, you have a shared responsibility model. Okay, so and this is one where your service provider has some ownership, and then you have some ownership of the solutions. Okay, if it's in your data center, you own everything. Okay, there's not this magic fairy running around sprinkling security dust in your data center. You've got to actually do those things. In the cloud, there are specific functions that your service provider will provide on your behalf, and that is part of the cost of your service itself. But you've still got to layer on other aspects of security on top of that. And today's presentation is going to discuss what those elements look like. So this model, first let's explain a couple of things about what we mean by the cloud. Now, there are many different solutions in the cloud, and arguably you could categorize almost all of them into one of these categories you see on the screen. So the first one is infrastructure as a service. So that means the basic physical infrastructure is provided for you, and you're given the ability to create virtual machines, but you lay on everything on top of that. So you build out the OS, you build out any applications and the networking that supports those things, and you basically are migrating solutions to that environment. Okay, so it's kind of like this forklift approach of I take a server in my data center and I move everything in that server directly to the cloud. Second is platform as a service, or PaaS. PaaS is sometimes called, and this is a model where certain services are provided by the service provider, and less of those services you are managing yourself. Okay, so a good example would be Azure SQL Database. That's a platform service. You don't have to manage VMs, you don't manage the OS, you don't manage patches or updating anything in that version. All you're doing is deploying the databases themselves and managing the data services that are running. So on PaaS, you are building on those services. You are taking something and you might build a net new application and have the data services running in the cloud that way. And the third is software as a service. Software service, the most prevalent example in our space is Office 365, where the entire infrastructure is provided to you by the service provider. Email is probably the #1 workload where people move to SaaS type models, and you're basically running the administration of the user accounts and how those are configured, and then owning the governance of the data inside of that environment. Okay, so when we talk about doing things on SaaS, we're really talking about consumption. Okay, we consume the services that are out there. We don't have to build them. We don't have to migrate to them. What we're doing is simply taking advantage of something that's already there and fully up and running. All right, so despite what you see here, or despite which model you may choose for different applications, you need to think about security in all of those aspects, okay? And as you move from on-prem to IaaS to PaaS to SaaS, you'll see that the responsibility of you decreases the further we go to the right. And conversely, the cloud providers' responsibilities increase as we move from infrastructure as a service to a platform service to software as a service. Okay, and the point behind this is that the further you get off to the right, the less you're managing. Okay, and you're focusing more on the data itself and managing simply less aspects of the environment. Okay, if it's in your data center, you own the whole thing. You own all of the aspects of it, and there's nothing being shared with someone else unless you bring in another vendor to manage your data center operations. So in a shared responsibility model, the layered approach to security really takes on different aspects. And I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. What I'll do is I'll just leave it to you to read over this content when you receive the slides after today's webinar. Okay. And the other thing is I'm not going to focus on every single element of that shared security model today. We're just going to highlight a few points in order to help you discover what cloud's shared security model looks like. Okay, so we're going to go back to this screen, but you'll see I've highlighted some specific areas that we want to cover. Okay, so we'll first discuss data classification, identity access, and access management, infrastructure that needs to be supported by those, including the physical security. Okay, so let's talk about these elements for just a minute. Okay, and today we are talking about Microsoft Azure and the fact that these solutions are Azure is running in data centers that are supplied by Microsoft. Okay, in the majority of cases, the data centers are owned and operated by Microsoft. They are their physical assets. In a handful of cases, Microsoft is farming those out to third parties. Okay, and that's done in specific countries where there are certain regulations or requirements that are imposed on Microsoft's abilities. Okay, and in Europe, we're actually taking advantage of this third-party aspect in order to provide a hands-off approach to European data. Okay, so instead of Microsoft owning the data center and therefore being subject to certain laws and restrictions, they've handed off the data center operations to a third party, and really they're able to provide a much better experience for customers that have assets in Europe. But each of these data centers is massive. Okay, and this is a picture of it, and it really doesn't paint the story until you look in the lower right corner. And I'm going to highlight a van that's actually driving on this highway. And when you look at it from that perspective, you realize that building over there is massive. Actually, that set of buildings. And that entire facility is just one of about 60 data centers that Microsoft runs of about equivalent size to this one on a worldwide basis. So these data centers are holding a massive amount of compute power, storage, and the networking facilities in order to manage them. Okay? But in doing so, Microsoft starts off with the concept of building it as something that is trusted. Okay? So if you can't trust Microsoft with your data, then why should you invest in cloud resources on Azure or Office 365? So this is a fundamental concept of how they're building out the services and the security hooks that go into that. But as also what Microsoft has learned, they need to extend the reach of how those security services are managed. And that's some of the things that we'll talk about. One of the things is data center security. Okay, and this starts off with the physical security from the perimeter of the data center itself to the building itself and having certain controls, as well as locks that prevent people from actually gaining physical access to the building. And then even if someone did get into one of the data centers itself, there's additional security laid on inside of the computer room itself. Okay, so it requires a significant amount of security controls in order to gain access to a physical server. Okay, so Microsoft's taking this multi-layer approach in their physical security to manage what they're doing. But then if we look at things on a services layer, Microsoft has made great strides in adapting with extensive data protection measures in place. They're trying to achieve a broad range of international, industry, and regional certifications from recognized third-party authorities. So this table illustrates some of those certifications for key cloud services. Okay, so and you see Azure is the second column on this one. So these really represent verification to customers that Microsoft has taken steps to conform to those different regulations. They take a step further than that with the Cyber Defense Operations Center. This is actually multiple points of interaction on a worldwide basis, but what they're looking at is a set of perceived as well as actual threats coming into Microsoft's data center assets, and they have a staff that interactively works with their systems as well as anything that you've deployed in a Microsoft data center to provide a world-class implementation of security services. So this is when you're deploying something in Microsoft's data centers and you're using a Microsoft-based support contract, if you report a breach, if you report any type of anomaly going on in your environment, the Cyber Defense Operations Center kicks into gear and is working directly on that case. Okay, next let's focus on a specific area here, one known as identity and access management. Okay, well first let's define what it's used for. Okay, so identity is basically establishing who you are. Okay, and what do you do, and what access should you have? And so different things that you have in your environment are going to define for you what type of security profile exists. Okay, what applications you have access to, what data you do, or more importantly, you do not have access to, and how applications should interact with you based on your identity and based on your group membership, based on geography. Okay, so these are all elements that go into the concept of identity management. So understanding who each user is and managing what their access level is for every element within the services is a underlying part of creating a proper security posture. Okay, now we did a survey not too long ago where we asked our customers whether or not they were streamlining their employee identities across organizations. Okay, and by organization we mean working with business partners, with application vendors, as well as services that they're using in the cloud. And lo and behold, a full 86% of customers consider it to be medium or high priority. Okay, so identity management is a critical aspect of cloud-based solutions, if not data center solutions, and it's something that we see is becoming more and more important as time goes by. But the bigger problem that we have to solve is that as we start seeing more and more applications being deployed to the cloud or services that are available where we're using cloud services, for example, today's meeting is held on GoToMeeting, and there's a security model behind that. We find that the model of managing user identity and their accounts and all their passwords in each and every one of these different services becomes more and more complex. Okay, and you couple that with the fact that users have on-premises security contexts that need to be maintained, their devices, so users' phones and their laptops that they'll take outside of your network, and then the accounts that you've already built for them on services like Active Directory. Okay, so from a user perspective, this gets very confusing very fast. So every time you light up a new application, that has the potential of confusing the user even further, or worse, it's yet another password for the user to lose. Okay, and therefore you have to request a password reset for those systems. And every time that action occurs, that is a security risk in itself. Okay, because if you're considering the difference between a hacker versus a known user, how does the security system know who it is? If the hacker has information about that user, then at some point they'll use that information to get into that password system and break through. So the complexity of multiple cloud-based applications and services really falls into this game. So one of the things Microsoft has done is looked at mobility and the movement of users as a way to really tackle the issue. Okay, so we start off with the basics. Okay, and we start off on premise because organizations have been doing this for quite some time. In the Windows world, we see Windows Server Active Directory as the core information management repository. But there could be other directories out there that are managing user identity, and applications may support this on their own. Okay. Well, when we start looking at the cloud, we see multiple services, multiple applications that are available and need to be supported by your IT organizations. Okay. Well, we want to try and bring the two together. Okay, and that can be done with a technology called Microsoft Azure Active Directory. Okay, so it's a subset of Windows Server Active Directory. It's more targeted toward cloud operations, but it's got some interesting functionality behind it to help manage password sprawl as well as proper identity and access for cloud services. And the way this works is there's a simple connection that is set up from Windows Server Active Directory into Azure Active Directory. And then whenever a user accesses cloud-based applications, Azure Active Directory can manage the identity management and access on behalf of those services. So it is leveraging the security models that are already in the cloud, as well as giving you a much easier way of managing user passwords and identities. There's also some other key components to this. It gives you a self-service engine for managing passwords as well as group membership. So those of you who've looked recently who don't have a self-service password management environment, if you look at your help desk tickets, I guarantee you that about 30 to 40% of your tickets are based on password reset requests. So having a portal for users to log into and manage their own passwords can significantly reduce the number of help desk tickets that you have to maintain in your organization. Another is single sign-on, and that is a portal where all of the applications that I might need to get to are presented on a single screen. And I have to log into the system with my Active Directory credentials. And once I've logged in, I've got access to all of those applications at a single click. Okay? And Azure Active Directory actually manages the identity management as well as the password manipulation for each of those supported systems. And that can be a very powerful statement there, because it provides a significant reduction in administrative effort in order to manage those passwords, as well as the fact that for end users, it totally eliminates having to maintain passwords for each and every application. And then finally, if I change my password, which is required from time to time, my password information can be resynced back into Active Directory. Okay? And I can manage all of this inside of the cloud and be more cloudified in those environments. Okay? And the last, I think, and this is probably the most compelling thing for businesses, is I can start to integrate my customers and my business partners into my identity management scheme. Okay, and that allows us to create rich applications that bring our business partners into our day-to-day operations and give us a much better level of touch with our customers, providing much better levels of support for them. Okay. So another thing we start to see happening as cloud applications proliferate is that organizations start to tend to build out cloud assets on their own, okay, with or without the support of IT. And so Microsoft has a tool to help monitor and understand what's going on with those. This is a network discovery tool. It gives you insight as to what applications are being used in your environment. Right? So when you turn on cloud app security for the very first time, it generates a report for you that shows all of the different cloud-based applications that end users throughout the organization are accessing. Okay? And it builds a lot of statistics on those, so you can see how many people are accessing different applications. And you can actually start to control whether or not users have access to those applications, as well as manage the control of data flow to them. Okay, so this can be used to control or thwart rogue IT operations that may be occurring within your environment, but it also gives you much better security and monitoring. Whereas if it is a valid business operation, you've got the tools to actually manage those things. Okay, let's go back to the shared security model. And this time we're going to take a look at the host infrastructure and what's needed to support that in an IaaS model. Okay, so first let's discuss what we mean by host infrastructure. Okay, and that means simply that the environment for my VMs, I own it. I own the operating system, and therefore I own any type of updates that need to be done. I own the maintenance of any type of anti-malware systems. I also have to manage the storage completely. So I have to define the storage model. I have to define what applications have access to, and also have to build in the security to ensure that the proper users are getting access, and conversely that the people I don't want to have access aren't getting into that data. So there's some tools built into Azure to help support those things. Okay, one is called the Azure Resource Manager, and what this does is it enables you to work with resources in a solution as a group. Okay, you can deploy, update, or delete all the resources for a solution in a single coordinated operation, and you can use a template for deployment that can work for different environments such as test, staging, and production. Resource Manager provides security, auditing, and tagging features to help you manage your resources after the solution has already been deployed. So Resource Manager really gives us a lot of bang for the buck in terms of managing our environment. Okay. The other is storage encryption. So when I build out an environment in Azure, I can choose to have it stored in an encrypted format. So that is encrypted data at rest. And then there are client-side libraries that we use in the development of applications that properly use encryption when that data is moving around. Okay, so when I start to pull information or push information to that storage, I've already got a model to support the management of security and encryption or decryption of the data as it's moving around. Okay, further up the stack, again, the less you have to do. And next, let's look at network controls. So by the network infrastructure, we're talking about the equivalent of the physical network that is deployed for cloud-based solutions. Okay, so if you're building virtual machines in your environment on premise, you still have to build out VLANs to support your virtual network or virtual machine environment. Okay, so you do things like creating VLANs or virtual networking. You can load balance those solutions. And you've also got to configure DNS and different access gateway points so that the proper access is being granted and services know how to find each other on your network. Another way of thinking about it is as I extend solutions into the cloud, my data center is extended to the cloud. So my network infrastructure, it simply becomes an extension of what I'm doing on premise. And I literally can use Azure as just an extension of that network. Okay, so these give you the ability to easily interoperate with the services that are already deployed to your network. Okay, there are a number of vendors that provide support in this area, and I'll just highlight one of them, being Barracuda. So Barracuda actually has two products that are deployed in Azure to help significantly reduce the risk and improve your security posture for building cloud-based solutions. So there are two main components to this. One is the Barracuda Next-Gen Firewall, which is used to manage external access into applications based in the cloud. And the second is the Web Application Firewall. So this is an app, a web app proxy that can, again, provide appropriate access where needed, but also give the proper data flow back into the environment. Okay. And there are a number of components where this protects against, as well as supporting the threats that we see coming into a cloud environment. But once again, Barracuda is one of many providers that provide security functionality inside of the Azure environment, and it can actually snap into an existing profile of security services that you already have running in your data center. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a short break, and we're going to address any questions that you might have at this time.
Absolutely, Skip. Thanks very much for taking through. That was a tremendous amount of content, touching on things like data classification and accountability, identity and access management, host infrastructure, network controls. You even touched on some of the physical security stuff. So a lot of information that that we kind of hit rapid fire. So let's take a brief moment to digest a bit of that. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the IM window. I'll be more than happy to relay those questions to Skip to make sure that we get those answered. I also just want to also bring back that to thank everybody who participated in the poll. Interesting, out of our entire audience, it was a split 3 ways, exact split, 33% for those who do have, the question again was, do you have an integrated security system in your cloud investment? 33% said yes, I believe we do. 33% said no, you needed a little help in this area, and 33% says that you were unsure. So a pretty diverse mix across the audience on who's attending today, on where their security posture is. So it makes for an interesting conversation. So if you do have questions, please put those in the IM window now. We do have one. You talked a lot, Skip, around identity management. And Steve has a question around just confirming, is it Azure Active Directory who's keeping your cloud applications in sync from a password perspective? You had mentioned, you showed that graphic. Is that what's keeping the other SaaS applications that are plugging in there consistent from any password changes?
In most cases, yes. So you can configure it so that Azure Active Directory helps keep passwords consistent across applications, or manages on your behalf a hidden password. Okay, so for example, if I am using a service like Salesforce, I can use Azure Active Directory to log into Salesforce, and it will manage the identity of the user. And when it does that, it creates this uber complicated password to do it. but the user never sees it. Okay, so as long as you're logged into the Azure Active Directory portal and then click on the Salesforce button, then you'll get into Salesforce, and Azure Active Directory issues that password. For other systems, they may be using your same credentials as you have on premise. Okay, and in that case, it is a consistent password model. And in the third case, the application vendor has its own password model, and Azure Active Directory is actually going to remember your password on your behalf. Okay, so it's caching the password in a secure location, and it significantly reduces the churn of passwords that users have to deal with.
Yeah. I can absolutely testify that a single sign-on solution has saved me numerous times, considering all the applications we use here at Softchoice, for sure. So we both drink the Microsoft Kool-Aid, Skip, but it goes without saying that we do hear, can Microsoft really be trusted with cloud security, right? Like us being in the industry for quite some time, we do remember that security wasn't really top of mind for Microsoft, years ago.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and I have a few data points for you on that. One is Microsoft is the #1 company in the entire world that hackers want to gain access to. In other words, out of all organizations worldwide, Microsoft has more attempts on their network and on their data centers than any other organization. So they have built up a internal security defense posture that is world-class, because on a daily basis they have thousands of attempts to break into their network. Second is that Microsoft has invested a significant amount of resources into providing security products and security services, as well as improving the security architecture that is built into all of the elements of their services. And again, if we refer back to that slide on the different security certifications, that's proof right there that Microsoft has done their homework and provided that. And then the third thing I would bring to mind is there's simply no way an organization can provide the same level of security support as what Microsoft provides in their cloud systems. Absolutely no way. Just to give you some perspective, in 2016, Microsoft spent $12 billion, 12 billion with a B, on security services that are inside of their network. Okay, so that's just the people and the infrastructure and the tools that they're using inside of their network, on which Azure and Office 365 are based. Okay, so that is a significant investment in that type of technology.
Absolutely. And if anybody does have any questions around specific regulations or legislation, I encourage everybody to just put into Bing Microsoft Trust Center, and you can go to the Trust Center and see just all of the checks that Microsoft has gotten, much more than any other organization on the planet, from a security legal posture perspective. So it's pretty eye-opening on the strides that Microsoft has made. So that's all the questions we have time for now. Please keep submitting them to the IM window. We'll have another Q&A session at the end. So we're about 16 minutes left to the full time, Skip. So turn it back over to you to round us out.
Hey, thanks, Luke. Okay, next let's go back to the shared security model, and now let's talk about data classification and accountability. Okay, so this is an area where Microsoft has made significant investments, and it's not something that's just come up over the past couple of years. This has been an area where Microsoft has had security, has done investment for, oh my goodness, at least 15 years. now that I think about it, more than that, over 20 years of investment in this area of their product set. It is now called Azure Information Protection, and it is a suite of services that are built into the Azure platform to support what you're doing in terms of protecting information wherever it resides, whether it be on-premise or actually stored into the cloud. And as I mentioned, this is something that Microsoft's been using for over 20 years. And the first forms of this really looked something like this. The basic form of it was an encryption layer where I defined data that needed to be protected, and it was automatically encrypted. And then there was a level of access control and policy that goes into that information. Okay, so fast forward 20 years, and we're starting to see more elements come in. One being classification of data. Okay, so maybe if I'm in a financial organization, I've got account data, and that account data can't be seen by people outside of the frontline employees who are working directly with customers. Okay, or maybe in a healthcare environment, any type of patient data needs to be classified as such, and only people who are dealing directly with the patients can see that data, but other people in the organization can't see it at all, or if you're outside of the organization, they shouldn't be able to touch it. Okay, so that classification process needs to be as automatic as possible, because it's very difficult for end users to run around and classify every piece of data that they have. Okay, and the third area is dealing with data once it's moving. Okay, and so I need to track where documents go when they leave my organization. Okay, so Office documents actually have this capability. If they are being protected by Azure Information Protection, they do this ET phone home, where it shows where the document is being accessed from. And I can say, I can respond to different threats on those documents by simply revoking permissions from a remote environment. So even if a document got out into the wild, if it had been protected by Azure Information Protection, then I could remotely revoke access to it, and therefore basically kill off the file from someone who doesn't have the authority to be touching it. So those are very powerful functions that are available today. And all of these elements really lend themselves towards a life cycle of data. Okay, and I'll give you a good example of that. Let's say you working in a publicly traded company. This organization has to produce financial reports to the SEC on a quarterly basis. So we would classify those reports as being sensitive and for the eyes only of the CFO's office. Okay, so Azure Information Protection would encrypt those files, restrict access to the files only to the CFO's staff, and define what the policies were. And one of those policies are that all the protections are lifted at the date of the earnings release. Okay, and if someone is working with those documents, maybe they have to work with other people in the organization to vet out the information, make sure it is tracked. And if the information gets into the hands of the wrong people, that could cause them a significant financial penalty. So they could revoke those documents at a moment's notice. Then we come back to the classification stage where, okay, at some point those documents don't need to be classified anymore and can release it on a time-based measure. So that's where we see that life cycle of data protection. Next is the beginning of the data protection services. And with Azure Information Protection, I can have elements of the documents actually self-protect it. Okay, so with this, I can either users can designate the sensitivity of documents and how they behave, or you can set up automatic rules. For example, if I have a document that has something that looks like a social security number or maybe a user account number, then the document suddenly gets protected automatically, and users don't have to do anything to support that. And it's marked with the appropriate level of protection on its own. And then once the document starts to be used, I can define exactly what permissions each classification of users has, okay? So maybe people in the CFO's office can view and edit it, and then copy and paste data to other applications. Maybe other people in the financial staff can view and edit it, but they can't copy and paste. And then other people in the organization can't even see the file at all, okay? They can't open it up. And even if I copied that file to a USB drive and ran off to a different computer, it would restrict my access to those things, okay? The other aspect of Azure Information Protection is monitoring, controlling, and blocking abuse, okay? And a good example of this is I'm handing off content to a couple of people, and I've got a case where I got people around the world, and Bob accesses it from South America because that's where he's located, and Jane accesses it from India because that's where she's located. But all of a sudden, I get an access point from North America and another one from Africa. Okay, well, if that happens on the same day, you know that there's something fishy about that, and the applications can be the environment can actually alert the user to that issue and actually block access. So in this case, Jane's access would be revoked to that document automatically, and she would have to contact IT in order to regain access to that document. Okay, and in that case, you probably do things like changing your password, look at where the document's being stored, and change a few things in the behaviors in order to protect the environment much better. And then, so we've talked about quite a number of different aspects of security today. And what I want to talk about now is how you can really formulate a plan to adopt security services in a rational basis, okay? And the way to do this is you start off with a plan, okay? What are the things that you need to define, collect all the requirements for your security posture, as well as understanding what you have and don't have, okay? And being able to identify what those things look like is part of building up that plan. Next is we deal with identity. Identity and access management should be the underpinnings of everything you're doing from a security perspective, and you want to make sure you make it easy for users, because if you consistently lock out your users from their work, they're not going to get any work done. So you want to make sure that they've got the appropriate access to things. Next is start to secure your physical infrastructure as well as your cloud-based infrastructure. And we talked about some of the support services for that. Then you secure your data that is on that infrastructure. And lastly, you detect and respond. So you manage the infrastructure that's already deployed. You maintain all of the elements of my security posture, and I continue to monitor what's going on with that. So the nice thing is that Softchoice actually has services that supports each and every one of these phases. And this can really help you deploy a proper set of security controls in ways that help you manage your support and manage the data infrastructure in a much more professional manner. Okay? So no matter where you are in your maturity of cloud security, we've got the right tools to help you, the right tools and the right services to help you achieve your security goals. So with that, I hope that helps you understand what a cloud provider is securing and what your responsibilities are, and the tools, services, and professional help that you can get in order to achieve your goals. And with that, we'll go back to our questions.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Skip. That was fantastic, and I'm glad we have a couple of minutes here at the end to answer some questions. I do want to reiterate that the last couple of slides, specifically around the stages of adoption, are important. And it goes back to our original poll that we asked everybody. So no matter where you are within your stages of adoption, you know, we can help assist you here at Softchoice with that next step, right? And making sure that you're delivering the outcomes that you're looking for to your organization and end users and customers. So, you know, with that, if you would like to talk about where you are within those stages of adoption and what might be the outcomes that you're looking to drive, the next step for you is to get in contact with your Softchoice account manager and set up the, you know, time with your Microsoft solution architect that is in your area. So if you're in Atlanta, it may actually even be Skip. If you don't know who your Softchoice account manager is, please feel free to email me directly, and I can help find who would be supporting you within our 45 call centers across North America, or 5 call centers in Toronto, Montreal, Chicago, Atlanta, and Seattle. My email address is luke.black, B-L-A-C-K, @softchoice.com. Anjali, if you can just send that off to everybody in the IM window so that they can have access, that'd be great. And we did have a question from Tony, Skip, if you could just give your thoughts. I did send a link to Tony around the differences between you know, Azure Active Directory Basic, Premium 1 and Premium 2. But is there any additional insight besides, you know, what is found on the Microsoft site, public-facing site, that you would want to add to that information around the different versions?
Yeah, there's actually multiple levels, editions, if you will. There's a free version, which is included with Office 365, and it's exclusive to the management of those accounts. There's a more advanced version, which has support for a handful of other services. And then there's Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1. And this adds in support for self-service password management, self-service group management, doing bi-directional data transfer. So a user can change their password in the cloud and it goes back to the on-prem. And there's one other thing. And then there's a Plan 2, and Plan 2 actually provides for provisional access. So I've worked in IT organizations where they had like a key vault, and you basically have to check out a key in order to gain access to a server. This actually helps you by saying, okay, for the next 30 minutes, you have access to these resources, and only those 30 minutes, and only those resources. And you go in and do your thing, and then you get out, and your access goes away. And that really can cut down on the burden on what organizations are trying to do with provisional access. Okay.
Awesome, perfect, thank you. You know, we only got about 2 minutes left, so if you have a final question for Skip, I'd recommend you get it in now. And if we wait for that just 10 seconds while a last question comes in, I got a question, Skip. You know, it's great to talk about the technology, but a lot of times you know, when I'm talking to some customers, and what they may be not thinking about as much is around a governance model or a cloud governance model. Is there anything that you would recommend around creating a governance model, or how difficult it may be?
Well, in one respect, your organization already has a governance model. Okay, no matter who you are, there is some set of rules, whether they're written or unwritten, about how you manage things and who has control and who controls the purse strings, things like that. So in building out a cloud governance model, one of the basics behind this is extending that governance model to the cloud. Okay. Starting over from scratch really doesn't do you any good. You know, if you start off with a foundation of what people already understand and expect, then that's the best way to be successful in a cloud governance model. But we work with a number of customers on building out cloud governance frameworks which really are an extension of what they're doing today, and it can help them be very effective in managing cloud services.
Awesome. I think we're right at time. Again, thank you so much, Skip, for coming in and spending the hour with us talking about the some of the security aspects of cloud and specifically Microsoft. This is a lot of transition that many of our clients are going through that we have proven methodologies to help our clients through. So get in touch with your Softchoice account manager, get in touch with me, and we can help you take those next steps. Thanks very much. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks, Skip.
Thanks.